Bobiverse Book 4. Heaven's River. Part 1. Jacques has a meeting with the Pav. They have become more hostile toward humanity, believing what had happened to them was the humans' fault and had nothing to do with an alien race of others. The meeting is for an exchange of raw materials for 2 auto factories. The Bobs had intended to give the Pav the auto factories, but the Pav had refused, not wanting to be in debt to the humans. After the meeting, Jacques goes to see Ferb, who is trying to restore the Pav home world that the Pav themselves are not interested in at all. It all seems pointless, and many of the Bobs who were involved in the attempt to save the Pav home world are haunted by the failure and have gone off into the universe alone. Ferb tells of his plan to also go off into the universe by himself. Jacques returns to his project feeling more dejected. Bob 1 has returned to Eden and his mind is occupied with the disappearance of Bender, a clone of his that had left from Eden and had never been heard from again. Other Bobs had already searched for Bender but had found nothing. Bob heads out on the trail of Bender. His idea being that Bender may have seen something and deviated from his path to investigate. Bob doesn't make it very far before Guppy announces that there is an anomaly. It seems that what he had detected is the signature of a megastructure in the Ada Lapona system. Possibly a Dyson swarm. Bob changes course to investigate. Bob 1 and the other Bobs meet to discuss things. It seems that replicated drift is accelerating and Bob clones are becoming less and less Bob-like. It is a bit disconcerting to Bob 1 how much the others have changed. On his way to Ada Lapona's, Bob drops off a small relay to allow him to continue communicating with BobNet. Bob arrives in Ada Lapona's and takes extreme caution. Whatever the civilization is, it's likely to be on the level of the others. Considering Bender's disappearance, it is likely not to be friendly. Bob sets up and starts to search for materials to make the equipment he needs. It takes Bob 4 months to find enough materials to create a more permanent relay system so that he can communicate with BobNet. Bob attends a moot and is disconcerted by the not-so-great reception he receives from some of the Bobs. He tells them of his findings, which confirms his earlier suspicions of a megastructure. One of the Bobs starts aggressively, questioning Bob about his intentions with this new civilization and is taking the Prime Directive from Star Trek far too seriously. Bob discusses the replicated drift with Bill. Unfortunately, in the decades since Bob has been out of touch, things have gotten worse. Bob goes to see Riker, who now goes by the name Will and has taken on a mountain man look. He has retired from dealing with humans and is trying to distance himself from the persona of Riker in order to convince people he is done. During their conversation about replicated drift, some of Bob's scouts are destroyed. He returns to determine what has happened and finds that some alien drones destroyed his scouts. Oddly, they are using radar, which is not a technology the Bobs use at all and is one of the reasons why the scouts did not detect the alien drones. It seems that the aliens have not discovered subspace tech and are working with 21st century level tech. Fortunately, this means Bob can use more lower tech stealth technology and that the aliens will not be able to detect scut scans. Bob sends more scouts and finds the wreckage of Bender's Heaven vessel. Herschel and Neil arrive at New Pav to pick up the metal ingots, and the two of them are talking about how obsolete they are now. They do not have any colonists and there's no real need for the Bellerophon anymore. Herschel comes up with the idea that they might take some human colonist volunteers out to uncharted space, since it is likely another hostile alien race like the others will be discovered at some point. This could possibly be the end of the human race unless some humans are so far removed that they will not be affected. Bob inspects the wreckage of Bender's ship and finds that Bender's matrix had been carefully removed by the aliens. Bob announces his findings to the Bobiverse. Bill and Bob discuss what they need to do. One problem is Starfleet and their insistence on following the Prime Directive. Bill informs Bob of other groups including the Skippies who are trying to build an artificial intelligence. Bob reads Bill's blog and learns that the division among the Bobs is much worse than he suspected. It's so bad that Bob decides to drink himself into a stupor because of it. Once he gets over his distress, Bob, Bill, Will, and Garfield take a look at the scans compiled by the Scouts. They find that the planet where the aliens originated from is completely barren of life. They also find that there are no asteroids or moons in the system. They then look at the megastructure and it is a long tube 56 miles in diameter and circling the Sun 3 times. The tubes wind around each other in a helical structure. It is a structure known as a topolis. With over 1 billion miles to search, finding Bender seems more difficult than ever. Bob gets to work creating more scouts. Will finds an expert on topopolises, but the man is not easy to get a hold of. In the meantime, he wants to get his family away from the Faith faction on Romulus. He asked the resident Bob to start preparing to get them out, which probably won't be easy considering Faith's stance on the Bobs. Bob and the others examine the scans of the topopolis. It is a tube inside of a tube. The inner one spins to create gravity that is exactly the same as the aliens' home world, while the outer shell remains rigid. The intelligent species they decide to call Snarks look like a cross between an otter and a beaver. The creatures are aquatic and live in the river that runs the entire length of the megastructure. The Bobs discuss what they need to do in order to find Bender, and one of the first things they need to do is learn the culture and language of the creatures. Bill suggests working with the Skippies, who could fast-track the language learning process. The Bobs examine the scans and find that the Snarks seem to be living with pre-industrial level technology and also seem to be locked inside the topopolis. The Bobs have another moot and ask for help from some of the other Bobs with various projects. There are more volunteers than they have projects to work on. Starfleet is not happy about this, but they don't say anything this time. A group called the Gamers work on a plan to get inside of the topopolis. They plan to piggyback on one of the alien drones. The Skippies are going to use their AI to work on the language, and a group known as the Borg work on Snark Mannies. One of the Borg suggests getting Bridget involved since she is a biologist. Herschel and Neil have gotten a lot of volunteers for their plan to make a new colony. More than expected, though, Herschel still wants to do more. They have tons of material, and he thinks that they should build automated heaven vessels to send out to every star system along their way to see if there is life in any of the systems. The day comes to break in, and the Bob drone attaches to one of the alien drones successfully. Their biggest hurdle is going to be getting to the inner spinning tube. There is a system designed to transfer to the inner shell, however it doesn't seem to ever be used by the drones. Fortunately, the Bob's drones are able to accelerate fast enough to match the speed of the inner tube. The next issue is how to go from the vacuum of space to the pressurized tube without setting off any kind of alarm. In order to get inside, they have to trick the sensors. It takes time, but the Gamers get the drone in. They finally make it to the inner door, which is also going to be a problem, however there is a simple solution. They dig their way through the wall. Once they have made it through, they bring in the rest of their spy drones and start observing the Snarks. They soon learn that the Snarks are called Quinlans. Later Bill talks to Bridget, and she wants to be on the mission. With her on board, the expedition will consist of her, Bob, Bill, Garfield, and Will as backup. After the other Bobs leave, Bridget brings up her concern of whether to clone herself or not. She wants very much to go, but she has adopted children that she doesn't want to leave. She expects that if she clones, all the other Bobs will expect her to become the all-wife of the other Bobs. She's not sure what to do, but she does have some time to consider. Another Bob mood is convened, and the Starfleet group is getting more and more aggressive about their stance on non-interference with biological creatures of any kind. Bridget makes the decision not to clone, and in preparation to go, she and Howard visit Marcus on Poseidon to try swimming as dolphins. It is an exhilarating feeling for both of them, and it seems that adapting to aquatic life won't be that hard. Later they take the new Quinlan Mannies down to the Quinlan home planet to test the Mannies as well as investigate what happened on the planet. Will goes to speak with the specialist in megastructures, who is a replicant named Professor Gilligan. Will learns quite a bit of helpful information about the topolis. The Bobs are finally ready to enter the topolis. They have to enter the outer shell through a tiny hole that the gamers had dug just barely big enough for one Manny to pass. Once inside, Bob is awed by the inner shell that is moving at over a mile per second. They must use the drone's cargo hold to get the Manny to the inner shell. It is a tight and harrowing transfer, but they manage to get all 5 Mannies across without issue. The Bobs and will enter the topolis. The level of realism achieved inside of the artificial structure amazes all of them. Bob, Bill, Garfield, and Bridget head out to start their investigations. Will's Manny is considered an extra and is left behind in the tunnel. They have a bit of fun in the river on their way to the Quinlan town. When they arrive, they exit the river and are quickly intercepted by a local cop. The cop doesn't seem to like the group very much. They find a place to sleep and leave the bodies in sleep mode while they go back to VR. Will and Howard decide to try out the Mannies on the Quinlan home world. While swimming the canals, Howard gets sucked into a side tunnel and the Manny is destroyed. The next morning, Bob and the others are up early when the same cop from before confronts them. He seems to be treating them as though they are delinquents. They go for some breakfast which consists of raw fish parts, which disgusts Bob. Bob listens to conversations and hears something about scattering. After breakfast, Bob goes out on the street and happens to take a glance inside of a wagon, and immediately the owner of the cart accuses him of trying to steal. He gets in an altercation with the cop, and soon all of the local Quinlans are trying to take him out. They have to quickly leave town. Unfortunately, the Quinlans seem to have anger issues that could be a problem for the future. The next day they come to another town, and they split up. Bob heads to a pub and listens to some conversations, one of which is about scattering again. It seems that the group intends to murder a Quinlan named Skeeve that they suspect of being a rabble-rouser. Later they try to stop the attempted murder and are attacked. They manage to save Skeeve, but they are attacked again, and this time one of the Quinlans shoots Garfield in the chest. They manage to fight off their attackers, but Skeeve is gone. They return to the pub, and it seems that they shot Garfield with some kind of tranquilizer which had no effect on his Manny body. They speculate that the group with the gun had been there to save Skeeve, and that group had thought the Bobs were there with the locals trying to kill Skeeve. They get a new room to stay in, and Bob puts a roamer in the rafters to surveil the place. They meet back at the pub and discuss the fact that Skeeve has already left the town. That's when 4 Quinlans break into their room. It seems that whatever group Skeeve is with is after them. They leave the pub and are soon cornered in an alley. They have to use their superhuman abilities to get out of it. They leave town again. When they come to another town, there's a festival going on and the Bobs want to enjoy it a little, but Bridget is only interested in heading to the library. They are almost at the library when all of them have a bad feeling. They turn to leave, and as they do, Quinlans start coming after them with swords. They escape by climbing to the rooftops, something ordinary Quinlans aren't able to do. Once they are safe, they return to VR and discuss what's going on. Garfield realizes that the Quinlan that gave them directions was actually a Quinlan that had attacked them in the last town. This indicates that the ones attacking them could actually be part of the administration, since that Quinlan couldn't have gotten there so quickly. They decide that in order to throw their pursuers off their trail, they will have to swim downstream as fast as their Manny bodies can go and pass a few towns. They even make it to the mountains and pass over into another section. They arrive in another town and Bridget finally gets a chance to go to a library. She learns that the Quinlans ruined their old world and were brought to Heaven's River, but they kept fighting, so their weapons were taken away from them, and that is why they have such a low level of technology. They start moving on to the next town and are invited to take a ride on a riverboat. They have a conversation with some of the passengers that seems to indicate that many of the Quinlans are becoming more animal-like without any selection pressure to be more. In essence, Heaven's River is so idyllic that they don't actually need highly intelligent brains to thrive. Bob and the others make it to another town and start gathering information as before. Bob himself goes to a pub and starts listening to conversations. After getting bored, he contacts Bridget, but she does not respond. Bob realizes that none of the others are responding. Will ends up finding himself being a representative for the Bobs again, even though he had tried to retire. In this meeting, the humans are discussing the PAV and their aggressive nature. The humans want to limit the PAV's access to space by taking every system in the area. Back on Heaven's River, Bob realizes that connections have been severed to BobNet. Bob quickly hides the Mannies at the bottom of the river and returns to the VR in order to investigate the problem. Bob manages to get the temporary relay station back online, though it will only support video calls. He learns from Bill that more than half of the relay stations in BobNet have been shut down. They suspect Starfleet. Bill suggests getting the smaller relay over to the larger one to see if any repairs can be made in order to get full SCUT capabilities back online. Unfortunately, it will take 6 weeks for the smaller relay drone to reach the larger. Bob is on his own for now. Bob considers creating more clones in order to get some help, but he doesn't really want to clone again. A Skippy named Huey offers to send himself through the connection to inhabit a local matrix instead of having Bob clone himself. Bill discovers a pattern of relays that have gone offline. They are relays that were autonomous or had old passkeys. It's obvious what has happened, and he calls a moot. As he's preparing to explain things to the Bobs that are able to attend, an air horn goes off. It is one of the Starfleet Bobs, and he starts to explain what they have done and demands that the Bobs stop interfering with biologicals. Bill gets angry and banishes Starfleet from the moot. He warns all Bobs to change passcodes in order to keep Starfleet from doing more. Bill asks Huey and the other Skippies to sort through the data and see what Starfleet has done. The Skippy's supercomputer is unbelievably powerful and has it done in no time. What they learn is that Starfleet has done a lot more than just take relays offline, and more importantly, if a relay is tampered with physically, they will self-destruct, which means Bob 1 won't be able to fix his relay. Bob discusses with the others what their next moves will be, and they decide that it might be best to get captured on purpose. Bob intentionally goes out to get captured, and soon groups are following him. One has pistols and the other has swords. At first, he thinks they are the same group, but it turns out that they are 3 different groups, and they start fighting each other. Bob runs but gets captured by the sword-wielding group. Bob is taken and interrogated by a Quinlan named Frida. Bob learns that it is the Resistance who has him. They are very suspicious of Bob and decide that they need to get some of the higher-ups involved. This is exactly what Bob wants. The Bobiverse is still trying to figure out how to undo what Starfleet has done, and Starfleet takes its next step, which is to take control of the auto factories. Starfleet offers an ultimatum to the Bobs. They can either stop interfering with humans or it will be all-out war. They have taken control of the auto factories and are creating weapons that they can use to fight. After it is over, Bill learns from Thor that they have managed to manually bring one of the relay stations online. Bob is taken to an upper-class house. When Frida brings Bob in, an upper-class woman takes charge and dismisses Frida and the others. The radio is brought into the room. A voice on the radio starts to interrogate Bob. The interrogation goes nowhere, and they decide to bring in a torturer. Bob threatens to blow up the entire room if he's in any real danger. Suddenly the radio speaks in English and Bob realizes that it is actually Bender on the other end.